Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we're here today giving you the first podcast from Sound Up Seattle on YouTube. Excited to let the people see our faces and show John's beautiful mustache today, and more excited that the NFL season is starting this week. We've got a lot to talk about. Anything to say, John, before we kick it off?
No, just excited. A lot of football. A little baseball, we'll get into it.
Sweet. Well, here is some Coyote Picnic.
Been a while since I left this town.
All right, John. First things first, let's talk Mariners. They have been floundering as a team. I guess we're going to do our floating and floundering, I'm sure, at some point. But the team has been struggling. They have went 1-4, I believe, since we last talked. I believe it was right before the Angels series. So they won that one and then lost the next two, or won the first one, lost the next two games, and then have since lost their first two games to the Athletics. How are we feeling?
Just kind of brutal. It's just been a brutal 4-game stretch for this team as they, are trying to attempt to come back and work their way back into the playoff hunt in the AL West. 4 straight losses by a combined 4 runs, which is equal to their margin of victory in the first Angels game. So 1 victory has led, in terms of run differential, to the same amount as 4 losses. It's just brutal. Inability to do what needs to get done down the stretch, be it pitching or hitting, clutch runs, clutch defense. It's just not there. 4 straight 1-run losses. They lost 5-4, 3-2, 5-4, 3-2. That sucks.
It does suck. And what I think a lot of that comes down to is we gave up a lot of leads. Every time I would look at the Mariners game or see what was going on in the score, we would be winning. And then I think, this most recent Athletics game, the Mariners gave up the game-winning run in the 9th. Munoz has had a rough stretch, I think is what I'll say. I think they lost 2 games in extras over that 4-game set. It's just been a tough stretch, and with them falling below 500, they're now 6.5 games back of the Astros. And Texas is kind of creeping up on them. They're only 3 games behind the Mariners right now. What are your kind of thoughts on the playoff picture? Do you really think the Mariners have what it takes to get to that step, or kind of finish out the season? I think at this point.
No, I don't. And I think we've both tried to remain optimistic as this team has had their ups and downs. But the fact of the matter is, they made their swing, whether or not you think it's as big as it needed to be, to go out and get a Rosarena and Justin Turner as a little support. And it just hasn't been translating to any real difference on this team. I think they were 500 at the time they made those trades. And, they'd been floundering. They were, at one point 14 games over, but they were around 500. They're now 1 game under 500. So it's not leading to differences in the win-loss column. And at some point, you just, you have to look at the wild card picture. They are, what is it? I think the Twins are currently in position of the second wild card, and they are, 8 full games behind the Minnesota Twins for the last wild card. So it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all.
Yeah, I think wild card wise and just playoff picture, the Mariners needed to win the AL West to make the playoffs. I think you have the Orioles and Yankees really duking it out in the AL East, and then the Central has the Twins, the Royals, and the Guardians. Whew, almost went back in time there.
Good catch.
At the Guardians, they're all neck and neck at the 75 win mark, kind of equal to the Astros in terms of at least their win-loss margins. So all of that put together means that the Mariners had to win the AL West, and the way that the Astros are playing isn't God-killing by any means, but the Mariners are about as below par as the Mariners can be right now, which is crazy. I think the additions that they made during the trade deadline are very, very different than what they did during the offseason. And I think eventually we might have to talk about, the double Mitch deal where you've got Mitch Haniger and Mitch Garver both not producing, but taking up, $30 million on the Mariners' salary or whatever it is.
Disaster.
You look at what Gino produced last year, and it's leagues better than what both the Mitches were able to produce at a third of the cost, basically. I think he's making $13 million this year. It's that kind of stuff. And Gino didn't seem to have, the T-Mobile Park factor where it seemed like he produced poorly. Like, he hit 231 last year, had an above 700 OPS. Like, he was good. I think this team just really needs to take a step back, and as a fan base, we're all clamoring for the front office to be gone, and I think there's something to that. This team has to spend money in the right ways, and this front office is making it so that Jerry Dipoto has to try and find ways around this horrible hitting. When if you make the right purchases, you don't have to worry about it. You buy the right players, and they produce no matter where they hit. So I think this team has a lot staring at itself in the mirror to do here, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this season. I think I'm honestly kind of like that ship has sailed. I'm out on that. Even if they win their next 10 games or whatever it is, I don't think they'll even be able to catch the Astros there, and they've only got whatever that is 23 games left. It's going to come down to the wire, and I just don't think they have it.
Yeah, just not enough time, and the way the team's playing. We were talking about this last stretch being a little optimistic about, Rays, Angels, Oakland, let's go get 8 wins. That was the time to do it. If we're not doing it against them, we've got a really tough part of the schedule coming up against the Yankees and the Astros and a bunch of other quality teams. If we're getting swept by the Oakland A's, I don't know how you're expecting this team to gain back an 8-game deficit, let alone, stand pat. So I don't feel optimistic at all about the playoff picture. For what it's worth, I am still really encouraged by the Randy Arozarena signing. I'm still a big believer in him. He just got to Seattle. He's not playing the best ball of his career, but he's been solid. And I'm excited to see him and Julio next year. I think, nobody wants Dipoto gone more than me, but the fact that I am excited about that makes me think it's going to be hard to get rid of Dipoto, because that was a big signing, and he's going to be able to lean on that. But yeah, obviously there are huge, huge flaws in this roster, particularly in guys like the two Mitches. The Garver trade is...
It wasn't even a trade; it was just a signing.
The signing.
$12 million or $24 million for 2 years, so he's making $12 million next year too.
Correct, and then $6 million to Haniger, which I was aware that was done. I guess you were still a little optimistic, but I knew that was done.
I thought he would be okay.
Yeah, he has not been okay. So it's just, there are some building blocks on this roster that I'm encouraged by, but the fact of the matter is, they're not ready to compete this year. They're not going to be ready to compete next year. And that really sucks, because it's not going to be possible to keep the pitching staff together the way we have it now. It's just not. You can't keep 4 guys like this together for a 5-year stretch, especially if you're not competing. So, wasted window. Yet again.
Yeah, I think this was, the 3-year window. Hypothetically, they make the playoffs in 2022, and then 2023 they miss them, and then this year was supposed to be, the 3rd year of that, and now Logan Gilbert's going to make a lot of money. George Kirby's going to make a lot of money. You look at Bryce Miller and Brian Wu; they're still a couple years away. But they're going to start making money here pretty quick, and Cal's going to need a new extension, or they're going to let Cal go. But I don't think that's possible for this team to do. I think you trade Luis Castillo before you get rid of Cal. We've got Randy Arozarena for 2 more years. We've got Victor Robles. He signed that extension. Julio's obviously going to be around forever, but it's like this team's building blocks of Ty France, J.P. Crawford, like those guys that were playing in the infield. They just weren't enough, and I think we just need better players in those premium positions. Luke Raley and Justin Turner as your everyday first baseman at this point isn't going to cut it. You need a 250 hitting first baseman that can actually produce power. God, I was looking at Gino Suarez on Baseball Savant this year, and he's hitting like 242, but he has 23 home runs, so he would have the second most home runs on this team. He's got a batting average, hitting 241, a 446 slugging. Last year, he hit 232 and with a 323 on base and a 391 slugging for a 714 OPS. That would be like the fourth best hitter on this team. And the other two of the other three were acquired in trades or like late or mid-season acquisitions. It's like this team was not built to succeed from the start. And that is the issue that it comes down to. I don't know how much more we need to dive into it, but it has been a struggle to watch, and I have lacked the desire to even follow this team for the last week or so.
Which is very unlike you. You're the eternal optimist. It's my job to talk about how much the team sucks, and they do suck, and it's at the margins. And you know what? I think Mariners fans, despite being not rewarded, are a very faithful bunch, and every year it's, guys like you. I know tons of guys like you that are like, so excited. Ty France, great player. It's like, no. The answer is no. Mitch Haniger, glad to have him back. The answer is no. These guys are not good enough. They're just not good enough. I think, as a fan, we just need to, harden our hearts a little bit and be like, no, these guys aren't cutting it. These guys are not professional baseball players like we need on this team. So, the way I see it, we've got 4 MLB hitters on this team, and that's Victor Robles, Julio, Arozarena, and Cal. I can't even put JP on the list. He's registered 1 hit since July. So I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I think I was gonna pull out some floating and floundering sessions, but to be honest, I just had both Mitches, and I was just gonna rant about this because I think this team and ownership has wanted us to be okay with going for the nostalgia bait or whatever it is, the Mitch Haniger signing, the Mitch Garver thing. That's the biggest free agent signing this team has made under Jerry DiPoto, and it led to a guy with a 160 average and a OPS of like 500. You think about the AJ Pollock deal, the Cooper Hummel, Colton Wong, all this stuff we talked about last year. Thinking that this team was going to get better, and they're just not, which sucks to talk about, sucks to say, but there's something in the water in the front office where they're not spending the right money. Jerry DiPoto's having to work around the fringes because you do have such big contracts that are coming with the pitchers and with these guys that you're acquiring, but to build a good team, you need to spend, upwards of $200 million. That's the salary cap thing. That's why it works in other sports, because you get teams like the Dodgers, even the Orioles probably spend less money, but they've got a really good farm system and those guys are producing. It's just like you have that upper echelon of teams who spend money and 75% of them make the playoffs, and it's really easy for them.
Yeah, that's super true. I'm also... Yeah, it is the money thing ultimately, and it's so funny the excuses that people will talk about instead of saying, "Hey, it's the fact that they're not spending money." I'm so sick of Seattle, it's so cold and wet to start the year. These players just can't hit. Just wait till it's warm; they'll get better. I'm so sick of that. There are professional baseball teams in Toronto, Canada, in Minnesota, in Boston. These are all places that are equally cold and wet as Seattle, and they have teams that have excelled in the past. I'm just sick of the argument. Maybe stop signing dudes from San Diego and go get a guy from Boston who's a little more used to batting in the cold. Ultimately, what is it? It's the money. They need to spend some goddamn money. Jerry DiPoto, open your pockets. Because, once again, we're talking about a symptom. He's not the problem. He would love to spend more money.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I think this team is going to go through some real changes here in the next couple of years. If not, I think, this is the season where people are like, hey, ownership needs to sell. That's what everybody in Mariners fan base is saying. And there's a reason for that. So we'll see this offseason how it goes. If we fire Jerry DiPoto and the ownership is like, oh yeah, that's going to fix everything. I don't think it will. I think that's kind of the problem, is ownership is scapegoating basically everybody except themselves so that they can make some money off what is a very profitable franchise. So we'll see what happens. But I would continue as a fan to clamor for new ownership or ownership to spend, whatever that is, because we're kind of past that at this point.
Yeah. Yep. Just ridiculous.
All right. Yeah, we don't need to do floating and floundering. I told you what I was going to do. I don't know if you had anything that you really wanted to say.
JP sucks. He's done. He's toast. I don't know what happened to him. He was one of my favorite players on the team last year, and this year he's been unwatchable from the start of the season to now, to this very moment. And it's very frustrating. I don't know exactly what happened, but
I mean, he kind of got the Ty France thing where Ty France got injured enough or got hit by pitches enough that he was injured and just could never really come back. And I think that is what happened to JP this year. He just had a few injuries and couldn't find his footing. And at this point, it's a little too late. And he's not going to come back. He's hitting, just above 200 at this point. Yeah, JP struggled, and I'm not surprised that, as a fan, I've been kind of turned against JP for a little while now because of his struggles similar to Ty France. And the Mariners showed that they could get rid of Ty France. I wouldn't be surprised if JP was, moved to second base next season. I think there was a little bit of questions about that a couple of years ago because he was doing well, and he's the captain of this team. But I think there's, if they're going to make an acquisition, it should be at a shortstop, premium spot. And maybe Cole Young comes up next year and JP's gone. There's all these other options, but JP has been struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bummer too because he's a fan favorite guy. But yeah, if we see what we've seen from him, I'm already calling it on the season. I'm not quite ready to pull the plug on JP, but if we see what we've seen from him so far this year for the rest of the season, then he's going to be Ty France going into next year. And all the Mariners fans are going to say, no, we love JP. Yeah, he's a above average player at his position, and he won't be. He will not be.
Yeah, I remember, I think we both took the under on his B-WAR at the start of the season, and we were very on point with that one.
Whoops. Sorry, guys. That one might be on us.
Oh, all right. Anyways, let's move on. Let's do a smattering real quick. Let's talk Storm. The Storm have been very mediocre since they came back from the Olympics. You want to break it down since last week?
Yeah, they have been 2-2 since we last talked, with wins over the Dream and the Connecticut Sun, and losses to the New York Liberty and the Connecticut Sun. So, pretty good losses, all things considered. Going up against the top of the Eastern Conference there. But I'm just not really liking what I'm seeing from them in terms of consistency. Their offense has been pretty consistent, but their defense has been all over the place. Yeah. They're not generating turnovers the way that they have in the past. And their depth, I've been really happy with the way we were talking about. This team needs to round into form. We need to, see these guys shake the rust off. And the big three have done that. Skylar Diggins and Jewel Lloyd and Nyeka Ogumwike have been great these last couple of games. All of them averaging around 15 points, doing it on the boards, getting assists, getting back to form. But the supporting cast is still not there. Ezi Magbagor, who we've talked a bunch about, and I am the number one fan of, has just not been nearly as effective as she was prior to the break. And Jordan Horston has been so ineffective that she's been bumped from the starting lineup in favor of Gabby Williams. No shade to Gabby Williams. She's a good player. We like having her come off the bench, but she hasn't done any better since replacing Jordan. She's yet to break double figures. Ezi has not broken double figures. Jordan has not broken double figures. That's an arbitrary stat, but the fact that our first three players after the big three have not broken 10 points since coming back from the break is discouraging, and it's the reason that they've been very 500. Yeah, I would agree. I think the main thing to think about with this team is, there was a lot of talks about them adding before the trade deadline, and I don't actually remember when exactly the trade deadline is, but if it's not already behind us, it's definitely coming up quick, and we could see that this team needed some, kind of the fourth player behind those big three, and Ezi to play just as well, because I think the difference in that consistency of play is what you're talking about there. You need a fourth player that can be just as consistent, and Ezi was providing that early in the season and in the kind of the first half. That secondary guard position is really where we've struggled all year because we've been spending so much money on those three players. But it's just been
been a spot where we talked about the inconsistency as a team. It's like the shooting is even, one of the bigger inconsistencies that we talked about last week. I think this team is just not where it needs to be going towards the playoffs. They've got a little bit of time to get things sorted, but really not that much. It's a couple more weeks and then the playoffs start.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's urgency to get right because we still believe in this team and want to see what they can do come playoff. But the problem with that is there's a lot of motivation for not, for kind of phoning it in until the playoffs. They are in third place in the Western Conference. They have a 3.5 game lead on the Mercury, so pretty good in terms of positioning. They're a game behind the Aces for second, but they're 4 games behind the Lynx for first. So, a little bit of jostling in terms of position where they are, but they're all but guaranteed a playoff spot. And yeah, it seems like they've been very complacent since the break. I would love to see them get out of it, but, so far we aren't there. It's looked and the results have been very complacent.
Yeah, next game is this Saturday against the Liberty in New York, so that's going to be probably. I'm going to take that as a loss personally. I don't expect them to be up there, and I think something to think about with the WNBA right now is the WNBA just struggles, I think, with the 3-point shot a little bit more because it kind of follows in the footsteps of the NBA, where the NBA is. Its best teams are very consistent 3-point shooting teams and kind of have those big playmakers. And I think the playmakers in the WNBA, you've seen it in the Caitlin Clark kind of renaissance in the last couple of weeks since the Olympics. She's taken that team to, above 500 now and in the playoff picture. And it's like having that kind of star power is different than having the 3-star power or 3 stars that the Storm have. And I think when it comes down,
there are only 2 or 3 players like that in the WNBA. So it's not like every other team.
That's what I'm talking about is like when you're spending money on those 3 players, but they're not the same level of player as a Caitlin Clark or an Asia Wilson or anything like that. It's like you need to have a better all-around team, and the Storm just don't necessarily have that. But we'll see. We'll see if they can turn that around.
Yeah, what the Fever have been doing has been pretty cool. It's just worth noting. Yeah, 7 of their last 8. Clark's on a tear. Pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. We can move off the Storm. We'll see. They play their next game. Yeah. Like I said, or I guess they play the Liberty tomorrow, and then they play the Mercury on Saturday. So a nice stretch, and then they've got some easier games to finish out the year. 1 game against the Aces, but everybody else besides the Liberty tomorrow is relatively easy. All right. We said we wouldn't talk about them if they lost last week, and we have to say approximately 2 minutes of words, and then we can move on. How do you want to break it down?
I'm not gonna. You can't make me. You can't make me do it. A team that may or may not exist in Seattle may or may not have lost to a team that may or may not be in LA. So what is there to say? They also may have lost to Portland by 1, and may have fallen to 7th in the standings. It's a real regression. It might have happened. It may have happened. Who's to say? We're not going to talk about it.
Yeah, we won't even say their name, but hopefully they can finish out the season strong and get the playoffs because we might talk about them then. But we don't anticipate them winning any games against any teams from LA at this point. So we're moving on. We're done with them.
They've earned at least 1 week of silence. They've earned that.
All right. Next up, we've got college football. I think let's talk college football first.
Absolutely.
UW. Last week, we thought, UW was playing Weber State, and I think the line was 26.5, 27.5 or something like that. And we were both like, man, this UW team's a little unproven. We don't really know how they're going to look defensively. We don't know how they're going to look offensively. We don't know how they're going to share the ball. They smacked Weber State around. They won 35-3. Did you have any big takeaways coming out of that?
I did, and you are not going to like it, but...
really?
My takeaways, there were some things, obviously, to be very encouraged by. I think the result was a little bit of a red herring. I think if you take a deeper look at the statistics, this game was a lot closer in a lot of ways than it should have been. And it makes my eyes look firmly at the UW defense and what they are going to be capable of this season. I guess let me start with the positives. The new era is here, and offensively, it looks very good. Will Rogers coming in, first game, 20 of 26 for 250 and a touchdown, very efficient. He did not even play the full game. Jonah Coleman taking over lead back responsibilities. Not really a committee backfield situation. He's clearly the head of the snake. 16 for 127 and 3 touchdowns with an 8 yards per carry average. That's fantastic. Offensive line looked solid in terms of protection and setting up the run. Receivers, Giles Jackson and Denzel Bowman, looking sharp out of the gate. Yeah, I've got some things to say about the defense, but why don't you give me your breakdown first? Don't let me rain on the parade before you at least get it going.
No, so my big thing was actually I watched this. I'm currently in St. Louis, so I watched this at 12 midnight, basically, when I was forming my thoughts. I thought the defense looked awesome, and granted, I talked about the quarterback situation for Weber State last week and how I thought he was going to be better than I think he was. But our defensive backs really shined to me. Was it Prysock? He was really good. He was kind of they put him on an island against their best receivers. And he didn't really let up anything big. I think the big thing was we limited any sort of big plays for a team that should not be having any. They might have developed some, time of possession just by running the ball. They might have just had it for a while, but they missed a field goal, and I think they only hit the one field goal, and that was kind of it for them offensively. And I credit the defense with that. I think the defense was really good. Obviously, for me, Jonah Coleman was great to see. I feel like with the change from the air raid offense that we were last year to more of a mixed bag of offense this year, it's going to be really fun to see more of the running game grow. And granted, Weber State probably isn't the best competition that we're going to be playing this year, but to see the run game shine in that way early on, where we're not just hucking the ball downfield going for, 70 points, it was good to see. And really with that came the time of possession. We basically put it on Jonah Coleman's back and said, hey, it's going to be easy for you, easy for us this week. Play 3 quarters, go get your 130 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then come chill, because we don't need to try too hard to beat this team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's completely fair. He looked great. He was doing his best Dylan Johnson impersonation, and I agree, it was very encouraging. What I saw, which I was less than impressed by, the DBs had a good game. Limited Weber State to less than 100 passing yards, and they were down double figures essentially the whole game. So they were, trying to move the ball through the air. But what I did see is that they were very effective in moving the ball on the ground. 155 rushing yards, leading to 16 first downs. The time of possession was basically split between this team and Washington. This does not look statistically like a game that should have been a 35-3 blowout. Statistically, this game looks like it should have been a 35-17, 35-20 style victory. Obviously, UW is better, and they played well. But their defense, particularly their linebackers against the run, their interior defensive presence against the run, did not impress me. And I think in the Big Ten, there are going to be a lot of talented running backs, running the ball right down your throat, kind of like Oregon. Remember, we would have lost Oregon twice last year if they would have just taken the ball out of Bo Nix's hands and just committed to running against us. And I don't think that's going to get past some of these Big Ten programs. And that's a real concern. I was quite perturbed by their ability to generate positive rushing offense against this defense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think what it came down to is Munoz, the Weber State quarterback, went 11 for 32, and we really held them to having to run the ball, which made this into kind of a shortened game. If you're passing the ball, it elongates the game, takes less time, all those kinds of things. And so what we really did was controlled the game through making them run the ball. And granted, most teams will probably be better at running the ball than Weber State. But I think the fact that we were able to do that, and it didn't even feel like Will Rogers had like a great game by any means. Like 20 for 26 is good statistically, 9.6 yards per catch is great. But it felt like it was all just Giles Jackson to the sideline, quick 10-yard quick 10 yards, and then it was back to the run. Like, it was like, oh, we needed to get these guys involved. But Denzel Boston, who I'm big on this year, didn't even have that great of a game. I could see a lot of big things for him once he kind of gets into the flow. And I think this game was about getting Will Rogers into the offense and then getting the rushing game established for the future so that we can learn to rely on it a little bit more than we did last year. Just a whole new system is going to take some getting used to.
Sure. Your point's heard loud and clear. If it was a scheme decision to force them to run the ball, then it was effective. The fact of the matter is a 35-3 win is dominant, and it covers the spread. Well said there. There are some things I would like to see. I think I've got some residual nervousness about this team's ability to defend the run, so I'm going to keep my eye on that going forward.
Don't hold last year's team to too high of a standard. You know, we lost the national championship game to a Michigan team that was running on all over everybody all season. So
that's correct. No, that's completely fair. Let's talk a little Wazoo, because they had a win that was equally, if not maybe more impressive. 70-30, absolute old school Pac-12 game. Against Portland State. Now, obviously, the defense might have some things to work on, but talk to me a little bit about Wazoo.
Yeah, I mean, you know what's super crazy about this Wazoo game? Their quarterback goes 11 for 17 for 352 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's 5 of his 11 catches were for touchdown, his 11 completed catches were for touchdowns. Almost a 50% touchdown succession rate on his completions. In terms of their just overall production, as a team, their defense probably needs to put some work in. But this was exactly what you said, a just kind of classic Pac-12 game where it's back and forth and back and forth. Each team basically scoring immediately. Wazoo's defense, I think, came up with, was it 1 interception? Yeah, they came up with 1 interception for a pick 6 that was 100 yards. So that was nice for them in terms of scoring. But yeah, I think just a very, very efficient game offensively, and that's all you can really say about this team. I mean, their defense struggled a little bit, but if your offense is scoring 70 points, it's kind of like the Dolphins last year. It's you can give up 35 to the Raiders if you're going to score 70, you know?
Absolutely. And, when you're up the way they were up, you're always going to give up more points. But, their offense is really the thing to talk about. And I really don't want to overreact because, even among, low-tier schools, Portland State is, creeping towards the bottom of the barrel. I did not even realize Portland State had a football program. But their downfield offense looked so classically quintessential Wazoo. And John Mateer, redshirt sophomore, former 3-star, showed out. His stats are almost confusing. How do you have 11 completions for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns? Well, let me tell you, it's a 30-yard touchdown, a 40-yard touchdown, a 60-yard touchdown, a 50-yard touchdown, a 40-yard running touchdown, and then a 60-yard touchdown. Before finally being pulled at the end of the third quarter. He was attacking downfield and was relentlessly successful. Do I expect that to translate against other programs? Not necessarily. But it's nice to see that Wazoo is still Wazoo, even if the Pac-12 no longer is.
Yeah, really good. Good to see from them. I didn't follow them at all this last week. And I checked on this because I figured we would be talking about it and wanted to mention the Cougs, and was excited with what we saw. So I'm excited for them to see what they can do next week, and honestly how they can continue this season. If they could do this against the Mountain West teams, there's something to be said for them to being in that kind of, I don't know, whatever it is, 4th tier of college football team instead of the 6th tier that I think we all thought they were in. So excited for the Cougars this year.
Yeah. Shout out to Oregon State, the only other Pac-12 representative, for a 38-15 win over Idaho State. Their rushing attack looked classically dominant, as we would expect. The only other outing in college football I really wanted to talk about was Michigan's Week 1. Obviously, that will be UW's first major challenge of the season.
Yeah.
And they'll run into him pretty quick. Michigan had a pretty ho-hum 30-10 victory over Fresno State. That margin is even, because it seems fairly close to our win over Weber, but they were down 16-10. And then they were up 16-10 and then scored a touchdown and a pick six, near the end of the game at garbage time. But, they were not moving the ball very effectively. Their defense was not getting the stops you would necessarily expect a Michigan defense to get. This is not the same team as last year, and it's opening up the possibility, in my mind, of an early season upset.
Yeah, UW comes into this week, week 2, at I believe number 33 in the AP poll and number 25 in the coaches poll. So I think, people have seen what they did this last week, and they've moved up. And I think they are probably closer to Michigan than I think we gave them credit for to start the season. And Michigan could definitely be, they won't be as good as they were last year, but they could definitely be closer to UW and kind of the middle of the Big Ten than people thought they would be, with all the changes and the rotation of players.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, you want to do some line predictions for Washington and Wazoo?
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a very good idea. Do you have? Can you get me the lines? I don't have them.
Yeah, I got you. So Washington plays Eastern Michigan this week. That Eastern Michigan is 1-0, and I think they won against Massachusetts 28-14 last week. The line for this game is UW by 24.5.
Yeah, they looked really sharp, and I think offensively they left a lot of arrows in the quiver. I would still like to see a little more of a Will Rogers-centric outing. I'm curious if maybe we could get that this next week. It's a big line, man. It's a really big line, and it doesn't allow your defense to make any mistakes. So I think I'm going to take the points in that situation.
Wow. I am gonna zag from you there. I think UW did exactly what they needed to do to show me that they could beat Eastern Michigan by 35 if they really want to. I could see this, being a 42-10 game. Like I think UW is going to score more points. They might let up a little bit more because it seems like Eastern Michigan is probably better than Weber State. But at the end of the day, UW is going to score 40 points. I believe that wholeheartedly. I think they're going to go more air raid offense, like you're saying, and try to get Will Rogers a little bit more comfortable in this style of offense. So we'll see what happens. But I've got UW minus 24.5 there. Now,
well, I love it. Yeah, you were right last week, so keep being right.
No, I was wrong. We both had Weber State plus 27, and we didn't hit that one.
Okay, but even then, look how close that was. They allowed 3 points. They allowed 3 points, and it was that close. So that's where I'm trying not to overreact.
For sure. This next one, the Washington State one, is kind of crazy. It's a crazy line. Washington State versus Texas Tech this week, and Wazoo is minus 2.5.
That's wild. That is wild. I can't believe that. That would not have happened before we saw what we did at Mateer. But the fact of the matter is, this Wazoo offense is really dynamic. In
Pullman, this Wazoo offense is pretty dynamic.
Yeah, and Texas Tech, worth noting, came out of a big scare, a 52-51 win over Abilene Christian in overtime. So, this is a team that did not meet expectations week 1. Now, I'm going to do something, and people are going to hate me for it. This is being a hater 101, but I think this is just good gambling strategy. People are scared about Texas Tech because of what just happened against Abilene. They're hot on Wazoo because of what just happened against Portland State. Do the correction. Water finds its level. Don't overreact on both sides to take that line. I'm taking Texas plus.
That's very fair. And I mean, technically it's Big 12 versus Pac-12. And you got to think that the Pac-12 will find its level there with Wazoo and Oregon State. But I will ride the high. I will take that on the chin if Wazoo is unable to cover that 2.5. But yeah, I think I'll take that 2.5 points. And this started at 1.5, and people are slamming it. it's now -2.5. So I think people are definitely riding that high. And, maybe you'll be right. It'll be a close game, but this Wazoo team is fun. I'm excited to watch them.
I'm really glad on our Washington-themed podcast we still have one of the hosts committed to rooting for these Washington teams. I'm just here to make money, baby.
All right, it is time to break down Week 1 NFL football. Seahawks, Broncos at Lumen Field. The line is Seahawks -6. Looking at this game, how are we feeling? What do we think?
Well, okay, we might have to back up a second. Should we do Value Dogs first? Because this may come up in that discussion.
Oh,
you want to do this first?
I wasn't even talking like the -6 line. I was just telling you the line to tell you what people thought. I just want to break down this game.
Okay,
we'll do Value Dogs after.
We'll save it. Okay. I am very encouraged by the Week 1 matchup. It's kind of an interesting situation because in so many ways, this Seahawks team is a kind of a known quantity. We know exactly what we're getting from them in a lot of ways because the offense, so much of it's returning from last year. Defensively, not a ton of changes. The big one is head coach. So this is the start of the Mike Macdonald era in Seattle, which I know we're all very excited for. And I'm curious to see how he's going to look in his first outing, what kind of changes he will have made systematically to this defense. And I think it's a good week. It's a good week to kind of have a tune-up game, as it were. This is the Portland State of the NFL, is the current Denver Broncos. I do not believe in Bo Nix. I'm not just saying that as a UW fan that watched him blow 2 potential Oregon wins last year. I don't know how his skill set translates to the NFL. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about him. He's like Drew Brees because he's small and has tiny hands. And it's like, wait.
He's also like Kenny Pickett and Bryce Young.
And me. He's similar to me in that way, which I'm not sure that's what we're looking for. So I think he is going to be very flustered by a defense that does not just exclusively let him throw down into the flat. And yeah, I think the offense is going to chew him up pretty good. I'm excited. It's going to be a fun Week 1.
Yeah, I agree with you kind of 100%. I think Bo Nix as a rookie QB, I think I'm a little higher on him than I think you are as a QB of the future. And it sounds like a lot of NFL, talking heads are in agreement with that. They think Bo Nix is going to be pretty decent. I look at this game and I see a rookie quarterback going against a head coach who had coached the best defense in all of the NFL last year. And I see that we talked about it, I think, last week with Caleb Williams kind of late, or maybe we talked about this talking about fantasy. I don't know, but it was like Caleb Williams will eventually develop into being a good quarterback, but rookie QBs will not be good against this Mike Macdonald defense early in the season. I think it's going to be very, very confusing for Bo Nix. He might just chuck it into the flat, but I don't think that the Broncos have the playmakers that the Oregon Ducks even had for Bo Nix to just let his team cook. So in that way, I think the Seahawks might run away with this. This might be like a 28-14 style game, which in the NFL is running away with it, not as much in college football. But yeah, I'm excited for this game. I think it's going to be a great opening one for the Seahawks, and I really want to see just kind of Geno unlocked in this new offensive style because it definitely did not happen last year, and I think the Shane Waldron offense wasn't really for him, and this Ryan Grubb offense, in the limited snaps that we saw of it with Geno and DK and all the starters, I was really happy and really excited. So getting a full 60 minutes of it, I am stoked.
Yeah, 100%. I'm also excited. I think this is a team that a lot of talking heads are excited about, this Seahawks team and what they can do this year. And much like UW last week, all there is for us to do is really show up and see what they can do. Yeah.
Anything else before we dive into Value Dogs? I feel like this week we don't have too much to say. I think we'll kind of break it down, see how the team plays out. So we'll see. But we could just hop into Value Dogs if you're ready.
I am.
By all means, buddy, you go first.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I was expecting a little pomp, a little circumstance. Welcome back to the 2024
Actually, you're right.
edition.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Come on. This is where we make our money here.
I had something in my throat. You saw me cough. I had to drink some water. You're right. Welcome to Season 2 of the Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs. Last year, actually, we'll give you the breakdown. So, Value Dogs, what it is underdogs, generally, over the last 5-10 years, have covered against the spread at a rate of like what's close to 55% or something like that, I believe, over the last 5 years. So we decided last year that the Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs would be great for those of us that like paying attention to sports betting and just like being involved in all of the NFL. It's a great way to keep track of everything. So what we do here is each week, John and I select 3 underdogs to cover the spread, which, like, based on the statistics, is more likely. Last year, we did not do that well. If you faded us, you would have made a decent chunk of money. We hit about 40% of our picks, but last year, in the same way, the underdogs only covered against the spread 47% of the time. So they were a little bit worse than the average over the last half decade as well. So don't blame us, blame the teams, but also fade us until we prove you wrong.
I was going to say, we're here to make you money however we can. So if that means losing bets 60% of the time, such so that you can win them, we're willing to make that sacrifice. That's the kind of guys that we are. We're ready to humiliate ourselves on the internet. So to open things up, I'm going to take my first value dog of the season, feeling much better about this year. Started off last year hot and then really fell apart down the stretch. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to trust my gut. And so I'm going to take the lowest hanging fruit on the board and take the Arizona Cardinals plus 6.5 against the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo is a team that's undergoing a lot of change, obviously losing Stephon Diggs, their number 1 wide receiver, for quarterback Josh Allen. They're going to be leaning a lot on rookie wide receiver Keon Coleman. And I think I'm a big believer in the direction that this Cardinals team is going. They also are going to lean heavily on a rookie wide receiver, but he's the best prospect receiver we've seen since Calvin Johnson, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm excited to see Kyler back in action. After coming off injured reserve last year, he looked excellent. So with a full offseason behind him, some new talented targets, get to see him with Trey McBride, make some more beautiful magic. James Conner doing what he always does. I'm a big, big believer of the Cardinals' offense this season, and I think they keep this game close enough to stay within 6.5.
I'm in full agreement, man. This was one of my picks as well. And by the way, we don't tell each other our picks, but yeah, we've got our first one in the bag. I have the Cardinals plus 6.5 as well. Like you said, the Bills are in kind of a rebuilding mode. I think the other person that Josh Allen's going to have to rely on is Dalton Kincaid. I think that's a big fantasy point of discussion right now. Is Dalton Kincaid's going to be way better than last year because he's kind of the veteran receiver in that receiving room. And I just don't see him as having the same explosiveness for this Bills offense as Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. So I think as a whole, the Cardinals are on the up, the Bills are on the trending down, and like you said, the Cardinals started with Josh Dobbs most of the season last year, and then when Kyler came back, they were cooking. So I could see them definitely covering. I think they lost 3 of their last 5 games of the season by 1 point each, and then a couple games by 1 score or 2. So they were close and they were doing well in the latter half when Kyler was there, and they had kind of thrown away the season. So I would expect that the Cardinals are going to be better, and I think they're over under on the season 7.5 in win totals, and I think this is one that could play into their hands a little bit. I don't think they're going to be great in the West, so this is one of the games that they might eke out, and then people might get really high on the Cardinals before they fall off towards the end when people actually start to cover Marvin Harrison.
Yeah. I also think, the start of a new NFL season is a great time to take a little bit of advantage. And it's a time where you don't have to be very smart to potentially make some money. You just have to recognize how other dumb people are thinking. And I think the easiest way of that is to just look at how teams have changed compared to last season. When people hear Buffalo Bills, they think Josh Allen throwing to Stephon Diggs and, barely losing to Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game. And when they think of the Cardinals, they think of a bit of a mess. And because of that, there are a lot of people where that's all they know about these teams, and they're betting on them accordingly. We just have a little bit more information. We know one team has lost a franchise receiver, and the other team has found one. And that can make the difference on these kinds of lines.
For sure. That and the Bills are definitely a cold weather team, and this is not cold weather. It's in New York, but it's September. It's warm, so
they need snow on the ground. All right. Well, since I technically stole your first one, why don't you take your second pick?
All right. With my second pick of the 2024 Week 1 Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs, I have got the Ravens +3 against the Chiefs. And that game is really interesting. It's a rematch of, was that the AFC Championship last year?
Yeah, either the semis or the championship.
Yeah, it's a rematch of that game where the Ravens kind of threw the opportunity to beat the Chiefs away. And I think this is just kind of their opportunity before the Chiefs have really gotten into their groove, before Travis Kelce is able to stockpile all of his energy for the playoffs. Lamar's always been good. He's so good as a starter. I think this game, it's going to be, it's kind of the primetime game of the Sunday. Or I guess actually this is tomorrow. This is the Thursday night game.
Correct. Hell of a way to start the year.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great game, and I think it's going to come down to a one-score game. And I think the Ravens could eke it out. I think the Chiefs just aren't as good as they were in the playoffs last year. They were very, very prepared. And I see the Ravens either winning this game or it being like a 3-point game. And at that point, you're going to at least get a push.
Yeah, I totally respect it. You can tell based on where the lines are at that even Vegas, that's the thing about Week 1. It's always a little bit of a shit show. You never really know what's going to happen. I really hope we both get a good jump to our value dog season this week, because Week 1 of the NFL season is the week to kind of catch lines napping. And yeah, taking two teams that are essentially equal in my mind. Both have made some improvements to the offenses in the offseason, and they played a really competitive playoff game last year. Take the one that's getting 3 points and see what happens. I can picture a Pat Mahomes slide just short of the end zone, down up 2 with 10 seconds left. It's going to leave some people very sad, but you very happy. Okay, moving on to my second pick. I did not overlap with you on that one. Instead, I am going a little bit out there. Getting a little bit creative, but this is the week for it. And I am taking the Washington Commanders +3.5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Don't judge. Keep it to yourself.
Oh, no judgment. This is my third pick.
No way. Are you kidding? Damn it. 2 overlaps. We better hit both of these, or what an awful start to the week. We can't do this. Okay, yeah. Well, Tampa Bay has a really bad defense. They were not very good last year. They have not made any significant changes other than a lot of their veterans are a year older. This is an old defense. A lot of carryover from the Super Bowl year back in 2020. And I think Washington can take advantage. Tampa Bay offense is very solid, commanded by Baker Mayfield. They got some good receivers, but they're not going to do anything spectacular. This is an offense that's going to put 14 to 24 points on the board against you. And I'm excited to see what Jaden Daniels, this high-flying rookie quarterback, can do in terms of, generating some offense with his legs, attacking down the field. And he still has, I know people are so tired of this guy, but Austin Eckler remains, in my mind, probably the best safety valve in the flat of any running back in the NFL. So whenever Jaden's not liking what he's seeing downfield, and he's not seeing an opening to take off for 20 yards with his legs, he's going to have the best receiving wide receiver of the last decade coming out of the backfield for him. So I think people are doubting a little bit. They're hating a little bit on this Commanders team. And I want to take advantage because I think they're a little better.
Yeah, I am in agreement. I think people are a little bit higher on the Bucs just because of Baker Mayfield last year too, and I think the Bucs being the quote-unquote veteran team, and I think Jaden Daniels is going to be just as good as Baker Mayfield, if not better, this year. I was high on Baker last year, and I think that was just because of the hype. And he didn't. The Bucs didn't even make the playoffs, I believe, last year, or did they? And they ended up squandering their hopes very quickly. But yeah,
Bucs stuff.
I see Daniels as the guy that, especially early in the season, he's gonna be the guy who can make do with whatever is happening on the field. He's not the type of Bo Nix type rookie quarterback that is going to struggle if nobody's open because he's not going to know what to do. He's just going to run away and get 6-7 yards on a carry or on a scramble. I see him as closer to Caleb Williams than I would like to think, but that Heisman race was so close, and I see Jane Daniels. He's probably going to struggle career wise, and I don't like his kind of mid range passes. I think he's going to struggle with throwing it in a tight gap, but he's got a good long ball according to what everybody's saying, and he's got that ability to scramble. And I think, especially like you were saying with Eckler in the flat, and is it Robinson or Burn? I don't remember. Was it Robinson? Brian Robinson Jr.?
Robinson Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the kind of weapon for the Commanders this year, and I'm excited to see what this kind of young plus veteran team can do. And I just don't think the Bucs have all of that going.
Yeah, it's worth noting the Washington defense, their secondary still has some holes and needs some work, but their defensive line is very talented. Top 10 group in the NFL without a doubt. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get some pressure on Baker. Yeah, Jaden, maybe I'm a little less high on him than you are. I think he's pretty unpolished. I think what he did at LSU was a result of having some ungodly receivers and, a 4.1 40 speed. But I do think he will be able to affect the NFL game immediately with his legs.
That's what I mean. I don't mean he's going to be great. I think he's going to be able to play in the NFL more quickly than a guy like Bo Nix or Drake May.
Correct. Yeah. Because I'm with you. When I think Caleb, I think NFL ready. Jaden may not be NFL ready, but the NFL's not ready for him either. That's the deal there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry to steal 2 of your 3 picks. Goodness gracious.
No worries, man.
Well, I guess that just means I get to
finish it out. Yeah.
As I pick my 3rd pick, and man, I'm really torturing myself over this one. Why do I do this? Why can I never just make up my mind beforehand? Yeah. Okay. People are gonna hate me for this, but I'm doing it. I'm going back to the well. Back to my number 1, I'm certain, picked team from last year. And that is the Los Angeles Rams. Plus 3.5 against the Detroit Lions. Another playoff rematch from last year. That was an epic game between Detroit and LA. Detroit narrowly pulled it out. I believe it was probably a 3-point margin in that one. And I'm just excited for it. From everything I've heard, Cooper Kupp is fully healthy. Puka Nacua is doing well. Matt Stafford is, had a full offseason with both of them working. I think this is going to be the best version of their offense we've seen since they've won the Super Bowl. Their defense is going to be worse. They're missing Aaron Donald. But I kind of just think that this is a team that can go out and score with anyone. That's kind of where I'm at. And Detroit, people are just really high on Detroit. They did it for 1 year, and it was an awesome year. But they've got a lot of years of struggling for everyone to suddenly forget after one solid season. Jared Goff is still a quarterback I have a lot of questions about. Their wide receiver depth behind Amon-Ra St. Brown is very questionable, especially with the departure of Josh Reynolds. And I just think, there's value here to be taken. That's what we do here at Value Dogs. Nobody's gonna like any of these picks. They're underdogs. It's never fun to pick an underdog, but I think it does.
This is how you win money, people.
Exactly.
This is how you win money.
Detroit could easily win this game by 3, and that would be fine. Because we got 3.5, baby. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So I was looking for the stats to back up our claim about the value dogs and underdogs over the last half decade. And during that process, I got a lot of last year's stats by like each team and how they fared against the spread. And the Rams and Lions were both I think 70% going against the spread as underdogs, because I think the Lions had a lot of underdog games.
We should have hit more of those last year.
We should have. I was riding the Panthers towards the end of the season. The Panthers went like 4-11. It was rough.
Riding the Panthers.
Which, you wonder why we had a 40% success rate, and it was because we chose teams like that. But yeah, this Rams team is good, and I think there's, you pick teams that you think have a chance at winning, and this Rams team is definitely one of those. So I could see this working out really well. I didn't want to ride with them yet. I've got a lot of hope in my Commanders and the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm not picking Dallas. I'm not doing it. I'm not giving those sick fucks the pleasure. And yeah, there's, part of this is, it is week 1. There are a lot of these lines where it's like, man, I kind of just want to watch and see how that game turns out,
Yeah, a lot of the lines are like 3, 3.5, 2.5.
I do have my inaugural
Rancid dog? You got a rancid dog?
Of the year. I do. I have my rancid dog. Week 1 rancid dog.
His rancid dog is always off, by the way. You always fade the rancid dog pick.
This year it's all coming back, baby. So the rancid dog is the one, every week I'll pick one dog to absolutely not bet on. In actuality, I encourage betting against. And this week, my rancid dog is the Tennessee Titans, plus 4.5 against the Chicago Bears. Now, this may be because I have binged the entire season of the Bears' Hard Knocks over the last couple weeks. And maybe because in my Dynasty draft last night, I managed to draft not only Caleb Williams, but also Roma Dunze.
Wow. Big day for you.
It was a big day. But I am all in on this Bears team. I think they're really, really good defensively. I think they're going to be a top 5 defense in the NFL. And they have all the offensive weapons necessary to be a top 10 offense in the NFL. I think this Bears team is going to be really, really good, and they could challenge the Packers for first place in the NFC North. Now, that is optimistic. But you don't
What's
have
not
to...
optimistic is them beating this Tennessee Titans team.
Exactly. You do not have to be a big optimist to say they're a touchdown better than this rancid Tennessee team. Starring Will Levis after teams have an entire season of tape on him. I'm seeing sophomore regression all over that offense. Not a big Tony Pollard believer. And they brought in Calvin Ridley, but their defense is going to be a lot worse. They're in the post-Mike Vrabel era, which is going to be a bad time in my opinion. I think Tennessee is going to sneakily be one of the worst teams in the NFL this season. Rancid dog.
I love it. It feels better than last year's Rancid Dogs already. We'll see if it hits. People hit the Titans plus 4.5. Please, just do it until he proves you wrong.
People need to remember we were rookies last year. We are now entering our sophomore season. This is when we really break out. So
we're going to regress actually back to the good side.
Correct. A little positive regression.
All right. Anything else before we sign off? We got a nice hour out of you.
No, that's perfect.
I'll also see you in like an hour and a half because we've got our fantasy draft.
Football draft. See if I can get Rome and Caleb again.
All right. Well, for John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright, and this has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a like or subscribe on YouTube. You can find us on a bunch of other podcast platforms as well. You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere that's important. Before we talk about what John's doing, I forgot to say the email, soundupseattle@gmail.com. We're still winging this, folks. John, what are you up to? Because you don't have any social media.
No, just binging Hard Knocks and watching old clips of Brandon Marshall in a Bears uniform. I can't tell you guys how in I am on the Bears this year. It's dangerous.
Oh, it's tough coming from a Colts fan too, I'm sure.
I know. I need a season of AR. I'm not quite there yet, but I believe in Caleb.
Awesome. Well, with all that being said, let's go Hawks, baby.
Let's go